this will not happen to me because I am bulletproof. Well, these are the sentiments of our next guest who went through something pretty bad. Felt this way for a very long time that nothing could really hurt her. But you know what? Then she was a victim of something very bad in June of 2022, actually June 16th, a violent attack. And we're going to delve into that a little bit and talk about the resilience behind that. But before we do, I just want to say, if you like the show, if this resonates with you, if you feel like this is something that other women need to hear, then you need to help me amplify that. I want you to go on and make sure you like it on Spotify, share it, review it, Apple, Spotify, any of the different places where this show is, and help me get this out to a greater audience. So welcome, Erika Rothenberger. It is lovely to have you.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here.
Well, let me say this, mother, civil engineer, Villa, Nova grad, smart, driven, strategic, got it all going good, right? And then something takes place on a day that you never expected nor asked for on June 16th, 2022. Will you take us back to that a little bit?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I will tell you, it was a day like I never expected because I thought I was living this big, bold, audacious life. And, and looking back now, what I recognized is, whoa, what could come out of this? But I'll bring it back to June 16th of 2022. That morning was like any other. I put on my favorite pink blazer, those matching pink heels. I remember saying goodbye to my husband that morning because he was headed off to Kansas City for a really important work appointment. My kids were newly out of school. They got out on June 14th, and we had a babysitter watching them that day at the ages of 6 and 9. And I remember leaving that morning really feeling like, 2022 isn't looking that bad, right? The kids, check. The husband, check. Everything short of the white picket fence. And as I drove to work that morning, I had a networking meeting. I remember changing my meeting with my executive VP from 10 to 10:15. And I remember that so clearly because it really just reminds you about how just one little small moment in your life can make such a difference.
Well, 15 minutes. You changed the 15 minutes. Okay.
Yes.
Go to that.
And then I remember being at that stoplight, leaving my kids a message, telling them to have the most beautiful day, not knowing that may have been the last message I ever had left them. And as I pulled into that parking lot, the parking lot that I had worked in for 10 years, I remember taking that last sip of pink Himalayan sea salt water, this one that Instagram told me was going to give me this dewy complexion at my middle age to try to keep it together. I still don't know if it's working, but I'm still trying it. And I remember just gathering my belongings, just again, like any other morning. And as I looked down at my phone to make sure that I wasn't going to be late for that 10:15 meeting, I remember opening that car door. And there he was. You see, he was a man I had never seen before, a man that I did not know. And I quickly muttered out to him, "Sir, can I help you?" And as that last word came out of my mouth, his fist hit my nose as hard as it could. He grabbed me by my hair and he threw me to that asphalt pavement. He proceeded to punch me 4, 5, 6 more times. But at that point, I really wasn't even counting. I was doing everything I could to stay alive. I was grappling. I was spitting. I was screaming. I was doing everything I could just to maintain my dignity because I felt like a rag doll in that moment. I didn't even feel like a human being. And
how long did that last? What was it? 2 minutes, 5 minutes? Do you have a recollection of time?
I would say probably between 60 seconds and 90 seconds or thereabout, if even that, because quickly he realized that I was a fighter and I was not going to back down. You see, I'd taken kickboxing for a long time. And what I didn't know, and unbeknownst to me at the time, that he had actually been a fighter, an ex-fighter. And he proceeded to then take the large crease of his elbow. And as I saw it come underneath my throat, I thought that was the last breath that I'd be taking on earth. The last time I'd be the mother to Drew and Adeline. The last time that I'd be the wife to Andy. And he squeezed as hard as he could until everything went black.
Wow.
And in that moment, in that moment, I felt lights come. I felt this out of body experience happen. And someone somehow greater than me brought me to my feet and allowed me to get up and actually have the conscience to be able to run towards that building, the office building that every morning seemed so close, But in that moment, it seemed so far away, not knowing if he was going to chase me with a gun, if he was going to come after me, if I was going to make it to that office building in this quintessential little town of Pennsylvania. That always seemed so safe to me, where the biggest thing that happened in most the days in Bluebell was someone running a traffic sign or the carnival coming to town. And as I ran into that building, I screamed with all of my might. The tears, the blood dripping down my face. I remember the detectives coming, the police officers coming, my colleagues coming down, me being in that state of not knowing exactly what happened. But in that moment, I did know what happened. And I remember handing my phone to my executive assistant and saying, take a picture of this because I am going to make a difference. And in that moment, as quickly as it happened, I had realized that this was happening for me. I don't think I digested it all in that moment, but I quickly realized that I know I needed to, it was a seed planted in me. And as I raced to trauma, the next 72 hours were an utter blur of detectives and nurses and doctors and therapy and the galore newscasters showing up on my own front lawn as my kids peered out the window asking if they were allowed to even open our front door. Feeling fearful, I remember a few days later being in my backyard, in my gazebo with a big hooded sweatshirt on, tears dripping down my face, trying to heal. And in that moment, I said, why me? Why? Why, God? Why did this happen? And I decided in that moment that I could be a victim, that I could be a survivor, or I could decide to thrive. And it was that moment that I heard the crackle of the laughter of my children in the pool. I heard the cannonball splashes. And I realized in that moment, I had a legacy to live. Those kids depended on me, and I could not and will not be weak. And I was going to do something with what happened to me and show them that any punch that comes in our life and any punch that you've had as you're listening to this, your punch may not have been physical. Maybe it was the bitter divorce. Maybe it was the loss of a parent. Maybe it was losing a child, but we've all had those punches and we get to decide how we want to pivot.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things I've heard you say, and I think it's very interesting, and I think it's very important for our audience to understand as well. It sounds like you made a conscious decision. You said either this guy is going to define me or I am going to level up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Tell me.
Let it refine me is basically I wouldn't let him define me. I was going to let him refine me and make me even better. And, someone said to me short days later, someone that worked in our office building, like, thank goodness this happened to you. And they didn't mean it in any sort of facetious way because they're like, this guy doesn't know who he blinked with.
Interesting. So we have a glimpse of who you were before. Mm-hmm. So give me a little insight into who Erika became after. And we're going to talk a lot about that.
Yeah. So like I said, I thought I was like, bold and audacious, girl with the civil engineering degree, hard hat in the back, steel toe boots, working the job site, corner office with, the window view and a mom, but there still felt like there was something missing. And I'll never forget my husband, who's a few years older than me, had said to me a few years prior to that, like, I feel something's missing. And I remember being almost angry at him for like, what do you mean? Like, you have 2 children, you have a wife, you have a beautiful home, like we both have careers. And it wasn't until I was a bit older in around 2022 when I realized there was something missing. There was like this passion or something that was just missing. I felt like life, I just knew there was going to be 3 right turns and 2 left turns and we're going to jump over the bridge. And this is kind of just the way life was supposed to roll. And then I felt like there was something more I was supposed to be doing. What I didn't realize is that punch was going to unlock that more to make me really take the word audacity to a whole nother stratosphere.
Okay. So I think, and having read something about your story, at least it sounds to me you're saying purpose. And if that's the case, you're an engineer, you have solved structural problems, you can look at things very clearly. But let's talk about that next step with the legal system, sort of kind of 3 for loop. And I want you to share that story.
Yes. And thank you for honoring that, because I will tell you, it's now been almost 4 years, 3.25 or 3.75 years since this has happened. And I will tell you, for the first 3 years, I went to 11 different courtrooms, um, whether I was trying to state my case, whether I was seeing him, whether it was opportunities where I went and he didn't even have to show. And going through that system and realizing that what I didn't know is that this man had been in prison for 12 years prior in New York. He had assaulted 5 prison guards and was let out early. On June 15th of 2022, he went to Philadelphia and he assaulted 4 women in the streets of Philadelphia that night. He stayed at a homeless shelter and the next day got on a local transportation, a bus, and proceeded to sexually assault a woman, taking her phone, getting back on that bus, changing his clothes, getting back on that bus and getting off at a station that I didn't even know existed outside my office building.
Okay. 2 questions here, because I want to kind of explain, set this up a little bit. From what I'm understanding, you were able to get up and run away, right? So somehow you were able to get up and run away. And then following all of this, you feel that he's going to be brought to justice, but there's a little kink in that sort of scenario with a sort of a law scenario about, violent attacks against family versus violent attacks against strangers. Can you give us a little information on that?
So the reason I was giving you the background is just there was a man of rage, right? This was a man had a long history. And what, unbeknownst to me, is due to the strangulation, the reason we had to go to so many trials, the reason there was 11 different cases is because they were trying to go after an attempted carjack versus a strangulation, because a strangulation in the state of Pennsylvania is a misdemeanor versus a felony. So
that's for
everyone. So as long as you know the person, it's a felony.
Okay.
If you do not know the person, it's a misdemeanor, a random assault.
That seems very odd.
And thank you for saying that, because every person I tell says that doesn't make sense. And I said, I know. Right? And that's the exact reason that I need to fight and change this law, because to me, cutting off someone's airway with an attempted reason to kill needs to be a law that no other man or female needs to go through in this case moving forward. That moving forward, justice should be served at the highest level that needs to be served. And we should make sure that the law actually supports that.
Okay. And so much to unpack here. Where is this now in terms of you trying to help, reform this law? Is this something that you're still working on actively?
Yes. So actively, we're still working on it. His final sentencing was back in August, just about 6 months ago. And we are now still actively working on changing the law and through legislation. And if in fact, and when it will be named a law, it will actually be called the Erika's Law.
Where is the perpetrator?
Perpetrator is in a lockdown facility for up to 20 years.
Okay. How are you doing now?
Love that question. I am thriving. I really am in so many ways. And I'm not saying that the trauma still isn't there, but what I recognize is I had trauma well before this incident had happened. And when I had the other trauma that had happened in my life, I had repressed it. I had pushed it down. I had wanted to forget about it. But this one I did differently. I spoke about it almost immediately. I really invested in therapy. I made sure that I was doing a lot of the work that needed to be done, because trauma is like water. If you don't deal with it, it will find its way out.
Right. Okay. So one of the things I've learned, I've spoken with a lot of women who have gone through all sorts of traumas, right? Whether it's work trauma, whether it's something, assault trauma. Every trauma is different. So I think I'm trying to, on this, for the purpose of the show, how do you work through these things? So I want to go into a little bit of resilience. How do you define resilience?
Yes. And I love that you edify that no two traumas are the same. We cannot never compare any traumas. Everyone deals with it differently. But really, the way I decided to define resilience is the ability to overcome what has happened to you, not to forget about it, not to push it under the rug, but to really work through a method that I talk about in my book called Bold. And
Right.
it's a method that I really believe that I was already practicing prior to this, and a method that I practice even more now, because resiliency is like a muscle. It needs to be used. It needs to be flexed over and over again. And you have to continue to build that foundation, because when the punch does come, the severity of the punch comes, you have to be ready for it.
Yeah. So this is something, again, many of us are brought up. I mean, you have a little girl, I have a daughter. Everyone goes through something, right? For sure. But I don't think, at least no one ever prepared me at a young age, what to do when the bad things happen. I feel like now I'm much better at it because I've gotten punches. So and there should be no shame in any of that, because we're all going to go through something and we don't know how to handle it. Now, your situation, you're a very, very clear example of right away. You said you went into that office building and you knew right away that you were going to do something about this. Is that a personality thing? Is that something we all have the ability to do? Or is that a mindset shift?
I think it can be a combination of a lot of different things. And I will say that I think it's because, again, that I had already gone through a lot of things in prior to this, that I had already been working on that muscle of resiliency. I didn't realize I was even working on it until it actually happened. And it's not in that moment that it was a conscious decision to say that. But I remember my assistant telling me, you knew immediately that that was something that you needed to do. I didn't remember how passionate I was about it until many, many days later. But in that moment, I think when we decide when the punch hits, how we want to react to it. But everyone's time frame looks different. Everyone's healing looks different, and everyone's trauma looks different. So I don't want anyone listening to this and saying, hey, I dealt with something 8 years ago and I still haven't dealt with it. Doesn't mean you still can't deal with it.
Good point. And I've heard you say a couple of times that this is something that was good that happened to you. Not in that make, obviously we know that it's not something we wish, but you feel like this was a purpose-driven sort of scenario, or we need to find and explain that a little bit.
Love that question. I really do. I believe now, looking back 3.5 years later, the trials, the tribulations, I think what it did is it unlocked. I think I always had audacity. I think I was always bold and brave and, badass in my own way. But I think what it did is it unlocked it to a different stratosphere. And I truly believe that it happened for me, not to me, looking back. In those moments, there's been days that have been so tough that, you really feel like it happened to you. But what I will say is that in that moment, we get a decision, and all the moments after we get that decision to be able to deal with it the way that we need to deal with it. And sometimes that's not easy. But I will say that it unlocked something in me that got lit to another level. And I decided I get a choice of what I want to do with it. And what I realized is so much of my healing was actually developing others and being that light for others. And I do a lot of support with women of domestic violence, because there isn't a foundation of women of random violence. And I hope there never has to be. But in the meantime, I know there's a lot of women of domestic violence who can't speak for the sheer fact that they're living under the same roof as their perpetrator.
Yes,
They're
that's
depending
true.
on them
That's really
financially. They're
important.
depending
Yeah.
on them to put a roof over their head.
No, I mean, and you know what? I see a lot of people that I've spoken with. They talk about this healing process of going through this, and part of that resiliency is to be able to reclaim their agency. I never understood what that meant. Where and how, or is this journey you're on a part of reclaiming that agency, and how important is that for women?
So important. I mean, I think it's vitally important. And I think we have to reclaim who we actually wanted to be. And what that actually did is make me realize in so many aspects of my life, not just because of this trauma, but so many aspects of my life, that I was really playing safe and small. I'll give you an example. I was still, wearing the blue suit to the office in Navy because it went along with being the only female in the boardroom. Well, I now show up with my pink suit jacket and feel really proud of it.
I have another woman that I interviewed, did this back in the 80s. She would always wear her pink suit, and people love that. So you were the second person I've heard that. Good for you.
And I will have people say that, well, that's really loud. I'm like, I know it goes right along with my personality. And I stopped trying to play who I thought I was supposed to play and really unlocking the truest version of me. And now I do it unafraid. But before there was a lot of trepidation. And I don't know. I had already had my podcast. My podcast took off to another level. I don't know if I would have wrote the book. I don't know if I would have started the Audacious Woman Summit that was started this last October. I don't know if I would have done all that because I think I still would have been playing in this safety zone.
Yeah, I think you would have. I think and I think that's the silver lining, right?
Mm-hmm.
You find you're being able to be more of your authentic self. But I find a lot of women struggle with that. Okay, we go back, we can talk about imposter syndrome all day long. But I'm also thinking, just from a perspective of some of the probably now putting yourself out there in a different level. Where are we as women? What are you seeing a little bit? Are there more people going to be wearing those pink suits?
Mm-hmm.
Why are we lagging a little bit behind in terms of that confidence to put yourself out there?
I love this. I love this question, especially as a woman who has been in the construction industry since 2001. And I will tell you, you did not wear a pink suit, but I will remember those first days on that job site that I did not belong there in most people's mind. And because of that, it really helped me. But I will tell you, we started out when I started in the industry, less than 5% of women were in the construction industry. Now it's about 10%. We have such a long way to go, but we have made drastic improvements. And I think the more of us that are willing to be bold and willing to be audacious and willing to pave the road for others to say, this is a safe place, the more impact we'll make. And I think it all comes down to psychological safety. It's not the hard hat. It's not the vests that we wear. It's feeling psychologically safe that I can be me and I can voice my opinion and I can show up in that room.
That comes to confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And I do still see gaps. And I even, speaking with some of the most successful women, they will tell you they too still suffer from a little bit of the imposter syndrome or the confidence, right? So I think, but what you're saying, and tell me if I'm wrong, I do think that the more you put yourself out there for these audacious sort of opportunities, it's uncomfortable, but you don't grow unless you're uncomfortable. So
that's exactly what Audacious Expansion is about. Being bold and being brave will lead to your expansion, will allow you to open yourself up to become that person that is inside of you. To me, it's not that you become better. It's just you're finally unlocking it and allowing yourself to get to the capacity to be operating as the best version of yourself. And there's always growth and always momentum. But I will be lying to you to say that I don't sit in some of those boardrooms and have self-doubt or feel like if I bring up this point, what are the boys going to think about this? I'd be absolutely lying to you. So I don't want anyone on this listening to this to think that that ever goes away completely. But I do believe that you become stronger and you become more confident with yourself and recognize that if you're bringing something up and you're getting shut down, you're probably in the wrong room.
Let me go back to this and let me ask you, are you seeing 2 or 3 things that women still suffer? And what are those things? Like, what do you see they're mostly suffering with?
Yeah, I would say, I would go back to the confidence. I really believe that's the foundation, everything. And having a daughter and a son and just seeing we've brought them up very much alike, but I still see the tendencies of my daughter being like, well, I don't have the 9 out of 10 boxes checked, so I probably should not take that next dance class, or I shouldn't do this. And like you see,
right. Oh my God, that's what they say. We, for some reason, think that it has to be perfect and ready to get to that next step. Even else.
Right. But we think about it as little girls. That's how we were told. We were told, okay, look at you, look cute. Everything's buttoned up. Like now, I remind my daughter that she's smart and she's capable and she's confident. And, the other day it was great. I was in actually volunteering for their Valentine's Day event. And to me, the most beautiful thing that came out of that day was not the games that we played. It wasn't the treats that the kids ate. It was that they each made bags for each other, just white bags. And every student in that room had to write one kind thing about that student. And my daughter came home the night before, who barely tells me anything about school. I have to like pull it out of her. She goes, Mom, everyone thinks that I'm so good at art. And I had no idea what she was talking about. Then the next day I looked at her bag and you're good at art and you're good at reading and you're kind. And I was like, we have to start speaking that to girls at a young age. And quite frankly, all of our girlfriends. Like, but the other thing is I really believe that we have to stop the comparison game. I really think that's what gets us in the way. I think that becomes our roadblock. We're like, well, we're not this or we're not that, or we don't live in this zip code. We need to stop playing that game. But that starts with us.
Oh, I totally agree. Let me ask you, why do we, even at this age, still care what other people think? Why? What I believe that is something 100% that has held us back for a bit, that I've been working on, because at some point you really shouldn't, right? You got to find your tribe. Yeah. What is that? That chips away that confidence.
Yeah. And I think the biggest change that has been is just how pertinent social media is now. It's so easy to watch glossy highlight reel and see like their hair perfect and this, but you're not seeing them in, 5:30 in the morning with like the mascara running down their face and then barely getting the kids out the door. And like, like a lot of times we're not showing that true side. And I really, feel it's so important to really show our authentic side. And I don't mean you need to show up like totally, but I think we see other people, we're like, oh, why does she have this? Or look at how clean her kitchen is, or, whatever.
And it's all a bunch of smoke and mirrors. Yeah. I totally agree. So let's talk a little bit about this new book you have coming up, because I think it embodies a lot of these various topics we're talking about and chatting about and saying we need to get better at.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what Audacious Expansion is. It's truly a guide to help women that are just want to unlock it. And to me, it's like going back to Jim Collins, going from good to great or great to phenomenal. This isn't like, hey, I need all this self-help or all this work, but I am ready to unlock my audacious energy. Because when you start to unlock it, when you become your boldest, bravest self, the expansion starts to happen. Doors open that you didn't even know were supposed to open. And it wasn't until I decided to make that decision that all of a sudden opportunities like being on your podcast open up because you're willing to put yourself out there.
That's great. And I really want to just spend a few moments talking about some how-tos, because I listened to a lot of your TEDx, some other things that you've done. And I think one of the great things you hit on are some secret sauces that we need folks to start thinking about. If they really want to be resilient, if they really need to have a mindset shift, what are 3 to 5 sort of things you can say, hey, listen, you've had a shaken identity because of this trauma, that, or whatever. Give us a little bit of an outline of the 3 or 5 things you think really work.
Well, I want to walk you through the bold method, but before I walk you through the bold method, there's something that I would love every person, male or female, that's listening to this right now to absolutely do when they get off this call or this podcast is I want you to open your phone into your notes section, and I want you to put the timer on for 2 or 3 minutes, and I want you to write down your audacious badass list, all of the things that you have done so far in your life, whether you've birthed a baby, whether you've moved countries, whether you've gotten a graduate degree, whether you've quit the job or made the job. Just let yourself go wild. No one ever needs to see this list but you. But you know what? We have 80,000 thoughts a day, and 90% of them are negative. When you start to have those negative thoughts, which are going to happen probably 5 minutes after you end this podcast, I want you to look at that list. And I want you to remind yourself, reprogram your brain of where you've been and all of the things you've accomplished, all of the things you've overcome, because you have all the power within you.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever done that. And I think I'm going to try that today, because I do think whenever you're feeling, they say to practice gratitude, but also remind yourself where you were and where you've been. Yeah. I love it. Let's talk about this bold method.
Okay, so bold, B-O-L-D. I'll do an abbreviated method because it's all spelled out in the book. There's a chapter on each letter. But bold, believing in yourself, really starting with your foundation, who you are and how you show up each and every day. That is a conscious choice. And in there, I have a method called 3-3-30. I'm not going to dig into that right now. The O is the ongoing process, the consistent habits that you decide to make in your life that are non-negotiable, but that are allowing yourself to build that foundation of that resiliency of who you are. L, leaning on others. Who is your board of directors? Who are the people that you are surrounding yourself, you're lifting yourself up with,
Right.
that are better than you in your definition of better than you? And they're not better than you. You just think they are, but that are raising your bar. When we surround
Love it.
ourselves with people that are leading the pack, we instantly become 15% better. And D is developing others. D is deciding I am going to make a conscious choice to pick up the phone and develop a girlfriend today, that I'm going to see that stranger at the coffee shop and give her the smile that she needs today, that I'm going to write the book, run the marathon, take the new job, and decide that because of that, I'm going to develop someone else.
Oh, this is great. And I didn't expect to get the bold sort of explanation here, which I absolutely love. So I think you're giving the audience a lot of great takeaways that they can put into action right away.
Yes.
And I just want to wrap it up, kind of asking you those 3 or 4 things that you would also say to anyone that's going through something bad. Not just, hey, listen, I want to just kick butt in my life, but are there 3 or 4 things on a daily basis? Because you were very, very specific in the talk that I listened to, of things that you can do on a daily basis to get you to that next step if you're struggling.
Well, that brings me back to the 3-3-30 method. Every day, 3 minutes a day, really focusing, no doom scrolling, no phones, no radio, no podcast, just with you. Be present with you. You are your biggest gift every day, the person you look in the mirror, and you deserve to invest in yourself every morning. For me, that's prayer every morning, being quiet and having that moment before my feet even hit the ground. Then the next three very, very really detailed gratitudes. I got to read my daughter whatever book you read her the last night. I loved, the green beans that my husband cooked for dinner, whatever it is, but be so specific so you start to feel it viscerally, that it's not just I'm grateful for my family. Start to be really, really specific.
Really present in that moment.
Really present so you feel it. And then you start noticing those other things that same day or the day after. And then the last 30 is exactly what we were talking about, in the sense of taking 30 minutes for yourself every day to invest in that goal that you want to go after. So that badass list that we made, I want you to think of one thing a year from now that you want to have on that list. Make it be a stretch goal. And if you work on that for 30 minutes every day, I guarantee you will either have accomplished it in 6 months or less than a year, because you decided to devote that time. It could be 2 15-minute pockets, 3 10-minute pockets, but decide, because the time is going to go by. We all have the same 24 hours. We need to decide what we want to do with it. Defend that time like you would defend getting your nails done, your teeth brushed, whatever it is.
Yeah. And I think, what I'm hearing from you is it's got to be a commitment. This is not something you do just once a week. It's something that you should do every single day to help shift that mindset a little bit, to get up to where it is that you want to be, because we all have the ability to define our happiness and our success, right? It's ours. And we have the ability to do that, and only one like to do it. So folks, if you like this sort of story, this sort of conversation, and Erika resonated with you today, please take a moment, just go on, share the show, make sure you comment, make sure you just rate it. That is going to help me deliver this story to other women. And the ripple effect is quite amazing. Now, listen, we got to hear Erika, and this is how she did it. I want you to know that you can do it too.
If you want to learn more about our guest, check out the show notes. And please take a moment to write a positive review about the show on Apple or Spotify, because this is the best way for bold women to find this show. To write a positive review, scroll down to the bottom of the podcast and click where it says write a review. In return, you get good karma and a shout out on a future episode. Until next time, my friends, keep pushing through that fear and making your future yours. You've got this.